Hello, welcome. Today we're going to talk about PDA, pathological demand avoidance. This is just an intro, and we'll use this central nervous system approach and lens, and we'll talk about what PDA is and what PDA isn't. I'm Kelsey. I'm a registered clinical counselor, accredited clinical supervisor. Those are the letters behind my name. I'm a neurodivergent person and mom to two PDAers. So I live in this world personally and professionally, and I'm so glad you're here. Pathological demand avoidance is gaining more understanding, knowledge, recognition, but it's still widely misunderstood by our medical community, often by our autistic community, those providing support. And parents and families are at the helm often of advocating or helping others to understand. So I am right there with you. I wear both hats in my clinical and personal life because I bring lived experience and then I bring my clinical lens. We're in this really beautiful time where parents and professionals are learning together, which is amazing because the honesty of lived experience is getting a bit of airtime. However, it's also complex because then the burden to explain is on often very stressed people and very stressed parents. PDA is not yet recognized by the DSM or the ICD, but it is recognized clinically within autism as a profile of autism. So this is just about me. I have a history of being a trauma clinician, and then I've moved into the neurodiverse world. I am home. Welcome to all those other folks that are new. It's rich and wonderful over here. Before we dive in, I'd invite you to join me in a land acknowledgement. This is where I'm living, and you're welcome to acknowledge the land that you're on as well. I live, work, and play on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I benefit greatly from the preservation of this land that has been cared for by these people since time immemorial. And I'm committed to doing my part to heal historical and ongoing harms done to these people and to this land. And this image here is to represent Turtle Island. Okay, so we'll orient first of all to the PDA world. We'll talk about what PDA is, what PDA isn't, and we'll talk about a nervous system lens, and hopefully leave you with a few tools that will be helpful for you to implement today. This is a diagram I made that really speaks to my heart and how I go through the world. So I'll share it with you. The person, the individual is at the heart of this diagram, as you can see, but there's also a thread that connects to society and to community. And we need to consider the ethos. So we think about morals and values, but ethoses are more, how are we actually living in real life? And what are the ethos of our community, of our society, and of this person? And what is going well in that combination and what isn't going well in that combination? So if we think about society, the society circle down here, autism as identity first language. I like to think about the social model of disability when we're talking about autism. And what that means is that between society and the person, in between there exists the disability, because society doesn't understand and isn't set up to respond to that person, that autistic person. The systems aren't created to honor who they are. And so often what happens is the autistic person takes on the burden of masking or trying to adapt or change who they are. But there's nothing wrong with who that person is. That person is beautifully who they are. And when we use identity first language, I'm an autistic person, we're able to own that and really honor who we are and do it without any shame. Because it's not about pathology, it's about how our neurobiology is built and who we are as a person. Support isn't about fixing anybody, no one's broken, but removing barriers in society, honoring who that person is, and finding spaces where that autistic person can flourish. If we think about the community circle, PDA folks are very clever and have high masking tendencies. We really need to trust families and specifically often one trusted person, because anxiety from parents isn't causing anxiety in our PDAers. What's happening is the parents are picking up on the anxiety of the kid, or they've had so many experiences that they're hypervigilant and worried about this thing that seems really itty bitty, but is really the impact would be very significant for that tender system of the PDAer. I'm saying this because of professionals working with families or PDAers or parents or schools. So we really need to think about and include a family system in the support and believe the people that know the PDA really well. And then when we're thinking about the individual, the complexities for PDA kids in seeking safety are many, and often seeking safety and autonomy will override one's natural tendencies, biological tendencies like thirst, hunger, toileting, those types of things. There are competing needs going on often, and we really need to keep access to safety at top of mind when we're thinking about supporting this person or helping them to create a life that is honoring of who they are. All right, what is PDA? Can't talk about PDA without honoring Christy Forbes. Holy smokes. If you don't know her, check her out. She's from Australia. She's an autistic PDA herself and parent to 4 autistic PDAers and deeply wise. So check her out. PDA isn't about defiance. It's about survival. That sensitive system, the PDA sensitive system, is in a constant threat state and trying to find safety. It's not about pushing back or defiance. Let's think about the first thing you learned about PDA. How was that informed how you think about PDA today? Was it tender and wonderful and beautiful? Was it yucky and talking about defiance and manipulation? We want to think about how we interact with the idea of PDA, because that's going to color everything when we talk about PDA. Those that are PDAers are deep, deep folks. They have a strong call for justice. They're deep feelers. They're often very, very clever and often outside the box thinkers. So you can appreciate how when we think about society, it's not set up to honor all these pieces. We're taught to disconnect from our feelings and sensitivities and grit through and power through. And we're taught to fit within a box. So the world really isn't set up to honor who a PDAer is, which is part of the reason it's so tough to go through the world as a PDAer. PDA was first described in 1980, so not even that long ago, by psychologist Elizabeth Newson. She noticed a group of autistic children didn't fit existing categories. They used social strategies to avoid demands. Their anxiety around autonomy was intense and pervasive. And so she proposed pathological demand avoidance syndrome as a profile within autism. And it's still understood right now as a profile within autism. However, we'll talk about that in a minute. She proposed pathological demand avoidance syndrome as a profile within autism, which is typically how it's still understood today. Since then, the PDA Society UK has done much of the research on PDA, but PDA North America is around. I mentioned Christy Forbes from Australia previously as well. So there is growing awareness of it. And although PDA is still most often understood as a profile within autism, let's think about it as like a cousin of ADHD and autism, because we're still learning so much. It's not recognized in the diagnostic manual yet, the DSM. So I kind of like to think about it as a cousin. It's connected. Is it the same? Is it different? The PDA profile of autism is a little bit different from a non-PDA profile. Anyway, we're learning and evolving. PDA is not oppositional defiance disorder. That is within the DSM. If somebody you know has that, it might be worth exploring. Is that accurate understanding? That's a very behavioral based kind of archaic diagnosis. Don't love it. I think it's one that's used for very traumatized folks and misunderstood folks, probably a lot of PDA folks. PDA is not being dramatic. It's not intentional defiance. It's not intentional. It's reactive. It's an attempt to keep one safe. So it looks like defiance, but it's like danger, danger. Autonomy is being challenged. I need to secure my autonomy. It's not bad parenting. And it's not simple non-compliance. These PDA folks are like brilliantly complex. And I say that with reverence. So what is PDA? Survival creativity, definitely high anxiety. I've never experienced the level of high anxiety that I have seen in my little guys. It's pretty tender. An intense need for autonomy, deeply impacted by the world and highly attuned. And because of that, I used to call my little guy, even when he was an infant in arms, I would say he's see-through, like felt everything, highly attuned, deeply impacted. Even the subtleties are going to impact these PDAers so deeply, and the impact is so much more significant. So there's kind of like a double there. Justice sensitivity and have mood changes. Behaviors are often reflective patterns of survival, not misbehavior. And that one is so important. I still hear a lot of the chatter for parents or supports or schools saying, how can we help this PDA to do this? And they're trying to be supportive. They're trying to be helpful. That's the intention. But my response is that's the wrong question. It's not about how can we get and support this person to do this thing. Could the question be, who is this person and what is honoring of them, as opposed to how do we get them to do this? How do we create an environment that allows them to be who they are? And because society's not built that way, it gets really tricky. Okay, common mislabels: oppositional defiance disorder, anxiety disorder, and attachment issues, being perceived as defiant, being perceived as phobic, being perceived as manipulative. And this one lands hard. Misattunement leads to trauma. So if we consistently see this person as defiant or phobic, meaning that we can exposure therapy them to overcome whatever thing is causing them anxiety, or they're being manipulative and we need to tell them off, the more we do that, the more we're misattuning, which inherently over time creates stress on the system and will lead to an experience of trauma, relational trauma in their being, in their system. And I'm not saying that to add stress on you, whoever you are. I'm saying that to bring awareness. We need to shift the way we're interacting at a very, very core level and strip away all that stuff and really be curious about who this person is. How do they shine? What does shine look like for them? What does safety mean for them? And strip away even more than we think we need to really be with who they are. PDA is rarely occurring on its own. Again, I've talked about the complexities a number of times. These are commonly co-occurring labels. Sorry, there's a typo there. ADHD, anxiety, OCD, giftedness, twice exceptional, autistic burnout, really, really common. Depression, sensory challenges, sensory differences, difficulties with sleep, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, trauma. The list can go on. Bipolar disorder, BPD is commonly co-occurring. If we think about one's neurobiology as PDA, high degree of need for safety, high sensitivity for unsafety, how can some of these other pieces not exist, right? Like autistic burnout, depression, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, sleep difficulties, trauma. I mean, how could they not occur if we're thinking about someone who's wired to be so sensitive and so attuned to all that's going on outside of them, right? Often a lot of these are co-occurring. I've noticed in my kiddos, sometimes OCD tendencies will get louder, which for me is more information or a marker that something's not going well, or they're having a developmental leap, or something's happening that I'm missing. So that gives me more information. Sensory challenges, how are we doing with that? Are we kind of at status quo, or is there a heightened sensitivity to something else? That gives me an indication that something's shifting within them, or I miss something, or they have something that's unprocessed inside them, or things are more stressful in their system. So all of these can be cues to help us understand what's going on for the PDA, if we're able to understand a baseline-ish and then see like variations of that. Drive for justice, equalizing leveling. Christy Forbes has coined the term equity seeking, which I think is really cool. So drive for justice. So let's talk about the light side and the shadow side of this. So the light side is that, yeah, like justice is important. Equity as an ideology is embodied and important. The shadow side of that can be tricky because if ever someone is feeling less, and let's think about children in society, we have to get really loud about children's rights. Our system is set up to have children listen and respond appropriately to adults, teachers, professionals, all of those pieces. Inherently in society, it's set up that way, but that's not going to work for these guys. So if someone feels less, it can feel really threatening to their system. And they're going to need to try to seek balance. A stress response is a need for seeking safety. If we can approach our PDAers as equals, I'll give an example. When my kiddo was 2, he wanted to draw on the wall, and we have a playroom, so go for it. You can draw on the wall in the playroom, no big deal. I wanted to draw on the wall in one of the bedrooms. You know what, Daddy worked really hard to paint those bedrooms. They're really beautiful. We want to not draw on those walls. And so he came up to me and said, Mom, I want to draw on the wall. You don't want me to draw on the wall. What are we going to do about this? And because that's become how we talk about things. Okay, you want this, I want this. What are we going to do? How are we going to solve this predicament together? He was 2 and he approached me like that. And I couldn't help but smile, right? Isn't that brilliant? And so I folded up some paper, taped the paper on the wall, and then he drew on the paper that was on the wall. And that was the compromise we found. When we're able to approach in terms of having a conversation and working things out together as a team, it shifts that sense of safety and perception of safety significantly. Nervous system lens. PDA is a nervous system disability. So raw, so sensitive, so tender. So PDAers are not too much. There's not an inherent problem with who they are. They're responding exactly as their bodies are designed to sense so much, to sense threat, to seek safety, to feel so deeply. And there's such a richness to this. There really, really is. The complexity, again, comes with when we interact with society, and society isn't set up to honor these beautiful, tender systems. And so that's where it gets really difficult and complicated. Their nervous system is constantly responding as if there's a threat to their system in ways that we probably can't always see or recognize. The fight response might be a resistance, flight, I need to go away. The demand avoidance is actually considered flight because it's an avoidance. I'm avoiding the demand through creative play, through perceived manipulation. Freeze, can't make a move. And fawn, people pleasing, not speaking up. Flop, total shutdown, everything goes still. Sometimes we talk about internalized or externalized PDA. So externalized PDA would be more fight flight, and internalized would be more freeze fawn. What does this actually look like? Here's some examples. I'll just give you a minute to take a peek at this of what that might look like for a PDA. This, of course, isn't extensive, but it can help us start to think about what it might look like. People might have a different way that they respond naturally in different situations. If you think about yourself, you might respond in one way in a work relationship, in a friend relationship, in a familial relationship. Your system might respond differently when you're stressed or feeling threat. And so too for PDAers is in different situations, different setups, they might respond differently. That can also be, if we think about the compounding pieces of masking, relational trauma that might be a part of their story as well. So there's a lot of contributing factors, but it's important to keep that in mind that your PDA or the PDA you're thinking about might not always respond with a flight response. Let's say we want to keep eyes open to other responses that might come up as well. A really helpful tool when we're thinking about the PDA in our life and how they're doing can be the window of tolerance. It's a really simple diagram, really user-friendly, and can help us understand maybe more of what's going on for the PDA, and also can be used for self-inventory for ourselves, for our own capacity, and to know how we're doing. So the term was initially coined by Bruce Perry, and the diagram, Steve Porges and Deb Dana piggybacked off Bruce Perry's work to create the diagram and model. You might be familiar with it, but before we dive in, just an opportunity to play with the idea a little bit. Think about a time in your life when you were having a peak experience. Maybe things were going really well, you were in the flow, your ability and capacity was really big. And then think about a time when things were tough. It was hard to motivate energy. You were feeling really irritable. You were feeling really emotional, really teary. Things were really impacting you. And where are you today? Our ability to manage different stressors changes on how we're doing. And a significant contributing factor to that is how much stress we're holding in our system and the current state of our nervous system. Now, it's important to consider that stress is cumulative. So what that means is when we hear parents say things like, it came out of nowhere, or we were having such a good day, and then suddenly everything changed. Typically, what's happening is stress is building up in the system, and someone's window of tolerance is actually getting smaller and smaller, but we might not know it. And seemingly nothing causes a cascade effect, but it's rarely just about that in isolation. It's typically been building over time, and then something small has a significant impact because there's so much stress in the system already. And it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. Also, how someone is feeling, how they're presenting is an indication of where they are. So what I mean by that is if you see more demand avoidance presentation in a moment, that might give you information that person's having a hard go, that they're not doing really well. If everything is reactive for that person, they're probably having a hard time. Or if they're shut down, they're probably having a hard time. So we can use this model to help us gather more information by just seeing how that person's doing. So if we pop over here, we can see the window of tolerance. That's when we're feeling well, we're feeling good. And if we think about the window of tolerance, it's going to shift and change, kind of like we just talked about, right? If you're doing okay, your window is going to be bigger and you can tolerate more stressors. If you have a lot of stress built up in your system cumulatively and your nervous system is a little bit wiggly, maybe you didn't have great sleep, your window to tolerate is going to become smaller. And for our tender, beautiful PDAers, sometimes it feels like to me as a parent that I am threading a very, very fine needle. The windows can feel so small and so fleeting at times when things are really tricky. So when someone's window is small and they have popped outside of their window of tolerance and they're having a really hard time, we might see hyperarousal, which is that fight flight response, and a hypoarousal, which is that freeze flop shutdown. So this just is a way to frame it in your own mind and going, okay, how am I doing right now? How is this other person doing right now? Are we in our windows? What am I noticing? Do they seem to be in a hyperarousal place or a hypoarousal place? And if you're seeing some hyperarousal, there might need to be some energy discharge, but there also might need to be support to come back into the window and to down regulate. And the opposite is true as well. Hypoarousal might need some gentle, quiet recovery time, and then might need some support to upregulate as that system rebalances. And for autistic folks, transitions can be tricky. So sometimes the down regulating or the up regulating can be a difficult time, and there might need to be some extra support in that moment as well. This list is not extensive, but when we're thinking about how a PDA might seek safety, these are some things we might see. Negotiating or delaying. I think if someone's negotiating, it's a yes. Like this is an agreement. We are working together. Changing the topic or distracting. That often means I can't go there. That doesn't feel okay to me. Seek novelty to re-engage interest. Refusing or withdrawing. And appearing compliant, but disengaging later or having a really hard time later. Helpful tips. Finding space for autonomy to be worked into the solution. So I gave that example before about my 2-year-old and wanting to draw on the wall, and we worked it out together. Sometimes I'll say things like, I'm thinking about this. What should we do? Or I'll ask, what's most important to you? This is what's important to me. Okay, what can we do about that? Being clear, really collaborative, and breaking it down, making it accessible. and looking beyond behaviors and actions. So again, it gives us information. What are we seeing right now? What is this person communicating to me? How is that information? I'm seeing they're having a difficult time, might not be the right moment to come together and talk about things. We might need a step in between to be able to come together. We might need to come regulate together or settle our systems together, deep breath together, take a moment or a pause before we're problem solving in the moment or trying to figure out what's going to happen next. Connection-based strategies, using humor or silliness to diffuse tension. Humor and silliness play that denotes safety. So we can do that ourselves in a moment. PDAers will do it as well. It's not them not trying to be serious. It's them going, it feels really, really tight. I need to break it. And then they're going to weave in some playfulness. Turning demands into games or stories. That really rich imagination can be at play here. Role playing. I'll be the teacher, you be the student. You can see that one too. We've woven in the idea of equalizing in there, taking control of the narrative, and needing collaboration. So helpful tips. How can we do teamwork? I need your help. Can you help me? I need your help with this. That automatically denotes safety, denotes equality. We aren't having power over. I need your help. I'm actually power down so that they're in a higher position than me, and there might be a willingness to engage. This is the situation. This is what I'm worried about. What can we do? Again, collaboration. And how can we find the yes? If we have to say a no, which sometimes we do, how can we find a yes? Help me find the yes. I want to say yes to something. What can we do? There might be a moment needing to come together. If someone's in and not in their window of tolerance, not in their grounded, balanced place, it's hard to access rational thought and problem solving. Okay. A lot of information. So let's talk about tips for today. We can't start with everything. We can start with one thing. So what can we do? Name it to tame it. I love this one. What's going on in the moment for me? What do I see? Is it something I can name out loud? Oof, I'm feeling really busy right now. My body's moving really fast. I'm needing to have a quiet moment. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Even if we see it in the other person and we name it for ourselves, we're using that directive language approach. We're naming what we're seeing so it doesn't feel scary. We're tuning to the moment. We're not hiding from it or escaping it. So that can denote safety too. And as we say what's happening, I have heard so many times, me too, let me help settle my system down too. So this can become a part of the culture in your family unit or in your school unit or wherever you are. If we name what's going on, not in a punitive way, not in an I know better way, but in a genuine, honest way, sometimes that can really help pop that bubble, which is why if we name it for ourselves, it's seen as non-threatening. It's not perceived or experienced as a threat most of the time. And so that can help bring us down and settle our systems. Something we can also name quietly to ourselves. What am I seeing in this PDA, or how are they trying to seek safety right now? As opposed to seeing defiance, as opposed to seeing manipulation. If I'm able to articulate in my own mind and gain clarity on what I'm seeing in terms of how this person's trying to seek safety, that can help settle myself down, because seeking to understand what's happening can really help us understand what's going on. Because when we understand what's going on, then we can respond in an appropriate and helpful way too. Sometimes we might name it out loud, and sometimes we might name it quietly for ourselves. Anchor and ally. How can I move to support their needs? What is being communicated to me right now? Let's do quick check, window of tolerance. Where are they? Where am I? How can I move to support their needs? Are my needs really significant right now too? And I need to settle my own system first before I can move into support them. Being really mindful because of co-regulation, because the sensitivity to systems around them. PDAs are going to know if it's authentic. They're going to know if you're a bit wiggly. So sometimes we need to settle ourselves first. And in that, we're actually supporting them. And then we can move to focus on their needs as well. And micro choices. What is accessible in this moment for them and for me? Itty bitty bitty bitties. You'll notice in these three tools, I'm talking about them, but I'm also talking about us because we need to have other awareness, but we also need to have self-awareness, especially if we're supporting these beautiful, sensitive, tender beings. So, what's accessible in this moment for them? What do they need? What's possible? And what do I need right now? What's possible for me? Sometimes we can't always have a big moment of rest in a heightened moment. Sometimes it's just a tiny moment. Look outside, notice the wind in the trees, squeeze your hands together if you're feeling tense or activated. Take a breath. Those can all be done quickly. Those are micro choices you can make in the moment to help settle your own system. And because of these beautiful mirror neurons we have in our brains, and because of the sensitivity to co-regulation as we settle ourselves, then we're able to also help settle the other systems as well. What's accessible in the moment for them, what's accessible for me, and what can we do in this tricky moment right now? All right. If you're curious for more, if this was helpful, feel free to get connected in lots of ways. We have a free, I think it's ADHD and PDA download that you're welcome to check out. We have bi-monthly newsletters that go out. And I have PDA Corner, I'm calling it. Beyond Demands is the branch of Healing Spaces that focuses on PDA. So you can share this, check out our upcoming webinars. Those are focused usually on trauma and neurodiversity. So PDA is coming up again in July, where we'll have free Q&A as well if you're curious about that at all. Here's my email address and our social media handle. If you want to get connected, you're welcome to reach out. And here are some resources that might be helpful as well to take a peek at. Janae Ellismith talks about trauma and neurodiversity. Love her stuff. Christy Forbes, I mentioned before as well. I think she's great. This is UK PDA Society and then North America. Speech Dude has some great neuroaffirming stuff that can be really helpful. And then Stephen Porges and Dana Cleary. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I look forward to connecting again or hearing from you soon. Okay, bye.